What's happening, everybody? This is Justin. This is Purple and Gold for Days, Minnesota Vikings podcast. Please like, comment, and subscribe. This is part 2 of the great Vikings quarterback debate. Which one would you take? Part 1 will be linked at the end of this video. Now, part 1, just so everybody knows, was recorded in July, and it was a conversation between myself and my compatriot Mike Castellino about which quarterback would you take in Vikings lore between, oh yes, get your roll on Dante and Iceman Kirk Cousins. Now, mind you, this was before the season started, so you have to put yourself back in that where we hadn't started 5-1 and shocked the world by all of the great things the Vikings have done thus far. Now, at the time, I took the Dante side, called him the roller coaster because his best season ceiling was a little bit higher than Kirk's, but his floors were definitely a bit lower, hence why I called Kirk Cousin the train, because he's relatively steady. But part 2 is not going to be about Dante versus Kirk Cousins. It's going to be Kirk Cousins versus Kirk Cousins. That's right. We are in the mirror universe. We're going to do the Spider-Man meme. And where I'm going with this is, would you rather have last year's Kirk Cousins, who did his obligatory 4,200 yards, 30 touchdowns, and only 7 receptions, or would you rather have this year's version, who, if we extrapolate out for 16 games, would be just over 4,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, and around 13 interceptions? Listen, we all know that with the Vikings coaching change, general manager change, and all the turnover that there is in an NFL game and an NFL season and NFL teams, that they're not perfect comparisons, but it's the best we got right now. So here's where I'm going. Yes, last year, Kirk Cousins looked good by and large throughout the season, had a couple game-winning drives here, had some games lost because the defense let him down, or the offensive line wasn't very good, or Mike Zimmer this, and play calling that, and Kubiak this, yada, yada, yada. I'll say this. Some of that is on Kirk, and most of it isn't. The bottom line is, this year's version of Kirk Cousins, the team's 5-1. Now, is that all Kevin O'Connell? I'm going to say part of it is that, yeah, he probably is empowering Kirk Cousins to do more than what he had been able to do in the past. But part of the reason I took the Dante side, and one of the knocks I had against Kirk Cousins, was his lack of clutchness, leadership, wanting to take control, wanting to be more than just a guy who works here. For example, when you're in a 2-minute drill and time's running down and you got 2 timeouts and you don't take one because, well, it's the coach's decision whether to take a timeout in a 2-minute drill or not, that to me says, okay, are you a leader or are you guy just along here for the ride? This year's version of Kirk Cousins is completely different. Now, some would argue that Cousins always had this clutch gene and always had this leadership, and he was just handcuffed by his head coach. And while to some extent there's probably some truth to that, I'll grant you, but that isn't the whole story. What is the whole story is this year, Kirk Cousins' numbers are down. They're the worst they've been his entire Viking career. And you know what I say to that? So what? The team's winning. And most importantly, Kirk Cousins is leading the Vikings on game-winning drives. Kirk Cousins is overcoming some of the deficiencies on the roster, something we've ad nauseum for 4 years said, geez, can this guy do this? Now, we're only 6 games into this season, so that doesn't mean that all has been changed and all the narratives about Kirk Cousins for his 4 years here and in Washington were completely incorrect. No, there's some truth to them. Is it ultimate truth? No, probably not. Truth is always somewhere in the middle. But I'm going to say it like this. I will take this year's version of Kirk Cousins 10 times out of 10 over last year's or any of the years that he's been with the Vikings. Yes, statistics are nice. Analytics are nice. No, quarterback wins are not the end-all be-all. The eye test is not the end-all be-all. But guess what? There's a little room in the world for both sides of the house. Yes, there are times where Kirk Cousins, when something has gone wrong, just clenches his teeth and walks to the sidelines and acts like he doesn't have a care in the world. Now, is that a bit of an over-exaggeration? Maybe a little bit, but there is, again, some truth to it. This year, things haven't always gone right. Yes, that Week 1 game against the Packers, outside of just beating the snot out of the Packers, was wonderful. But since that game, this offense hasn't really gelled as much as it could. Yes, there have been a couple of quarters here and there and game-winning drives and all that good stuff. We like that. We really like that. But having said that, this offense is still inconsistent at best at times. This offense is still near the top of the league in 3 and outs, which is something they led the league in last year. So, while there has been some improvement, there is some more room to improve. But what I'm going to take away from this version of Kirk Cousins and what I hope can be sustainable for the rest of the season is that he has that clutch gene. There's a drive in one of the games that the Vikings ultimately won that stands out to me more than any other drive that he's had this season. I'll let you think on it for just a moment. There were times last year, for example, that San Francisco game where he was throwing haymakers, okay, maybe not, with good old Jimmy Garoppolo, threw an interception that got returned down to the 1 or the 2 yard line, and ultimately the 49ers scored on the next play or two. Technically, was it a pick six? No, but ostensibly it pretty much was. From that moment on, for the next 3.5 weeks, it was in Kirk Cousins' head. He was afraid to make mistakes. He was afraid to take chances. He was just what Kirk Cousins has been up until this point. This year, the drive in specific that I'm talking about is that Chicago Bears game. Remember, he throws that interception. Now, granted, I've been one that says I'm okay with interceptions, and frankly, I was okay with that interception because guess what? He wasn't checking it down to C.J. Ham like he normally does. Granted, yes, maybe on first down that was a little bit too aggressive, and no, you don't want to get too reckless with the bit. But having said that, I don't mind the aggressiveness. I'm not saying I want to see 15 of those in a year, but I don't mind that one. What impressed me most about that interception by Kirk Cousins is he went back to the sideline, talked to Kevin O'Connell, and the next time the Vikings touched the ball, which ostensibly was the last time because we're not going to count those kneel downs, he led that Vikings offense on a game-winning drive for over 7 minutes. He didn't let the interception bother him. He just brushed it off. That's something that previous versions of Kirk Cousins didn't do. That's leadership. That's understanding that sometimes everything doesn't go to plan. There have been times where if it didn't go to plan, you get hit in the mouth. Okay, Katie bar the door. End of discussion. Game over. This year's version of Kirk Cousins, while he does not have all of the statistics that he's had in the past, has the clutch gene. I don't mind the idea that let's try to find somewhere in the middle between the guy that can put up a little bit more statistically, put some more points on the board, and give our defense a little bit of a better opportunity to have a lead as to always having to rely on turnovers and big plays, all which are nice, but let's call it spade a spade. Not all of what has gotten the Vikings to 5-1 is exactly sustainable to be able to do that for an entire season, much less win playoff games. But what I like about this version and why I would take this version 10 out of 10 times is that he has found the clutch gene. He has said, all right, I got to be the leader. I got to rally the troops. Now, yes, some of that goes to Kevin O'Connell as well. We all understand that. But a quarterback, a leader, oftentimes has to do more than what his required amount of work to do is. He has to overcome roster deficiencies. He has to be able to cover up for sometimes, bad plays by the rest of your teammates. And by and large, this year, Kirk Cousins has done that. So all I'm going to say is this. We're going to revisit the great quarterback debate between Dante and Kirk Cousins. And yes, I still would take him on aggregate because, again, let's mind you, it's only been 6 games. But at the end of the year, we'll evaluate it. And I will say that the gap between the two that I had is rapidly closing. I'm not saying that at the end of the year, Kirk Cousins, in my mind, will be somebody that I would take in one game over Dante. But I will say that 6 weeks into this, 6 games into this, it's a lot closer than I thought it would be. And all I'm going to say is don't worry about the statistics. The statistics will come around. But guess what? Even if they don't, I'd rather have a guy that I'm confident in that if we're down by 4 with less than 2 minutes and only one timeout as an example, that I actually don't cringe about, what's going to go wrong here? I actually have faith that in that scenario, Kirk Cousins is actually going to have the clutch gene to be able to bring us to a victory and snatch it from the jaws of defeat. I'll say this one more time. Yeah, let's find a better balance. Let's get some more stats on the board, but not at the cost of the confidence. I've never seen Kirk Cousins as confident as he is outside of a game or two here or there. Oh, sure. We had those months in 2019 where he had a 4-game stretch where he looked unstoppable against mediocre to bad teams. Big deal. Where'd that get us? A real big butt kicking in the divisional round of the playoffs. This year's version of Kirk Cousins, most importantly, is a version of Kirk Cousins that I would feel confident having as my quarterback when we get to the playoffs. Not if, because we are. We're winning this division, and at the end of it, it's going to be because Kirk Cousins has found his leadership, and Kirk Cousins has found that clutch gene. Hopefully, the self-evaluation during the bye week, the self-scouting, will be able to find some ways to find other things that can be a bit more sustainable than always waiting until the last minutes to finally pull the rabbit out of the hat. That's it for today. Like I said, please hit that comment button, the subscribe button, the like button. Share this with your friends. This is Justin in Rochester for Purple and Gold for Days, Minnesota Vikings podcast. We'll catch you on the flip side.